Zara lived in a small, sun-dappled village nestled between rolling hills and quiet forests, a place where every morning the mist would rise from the river and scatter like silver threads across the fields. She was known to everyone in the village for her kindness, her patient heart, and her uncanny insight into the struggles and joys of those around her. People would often say she seemed to understand more than she let on, as though her eyes could see not only the present but the hidden truths that people carried in their hearts. And it was not just intuition or luck that gave her this gift, it was the mirror. The mirror was unlike any ordinary looking glass. Its frame was simple, carved with delicate patterns of intertwining vines and small blossoms, yet the glass itself shimmered in ways that seemed alive. When Zara looked into it, she would see herself, yes, but she would also sometimes catch glimpses of things no one else could see. A flicker of a neighbor's sorrow, a shadow of someone's secret hope, or even a faint echo of the future would appear for a heartbeat, revealing what was hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. The mirror had been given to her by her late grandmother, a wise woman who had always said that mirrors could reveal the unseen, that they held whispers of the soul for those patient and gentle enough to listen. Zara treasured the mirror not for vanity but for guidance. Every morning she would sit quietly before it, brushing her dark hair back from her face, listening to the faint murmurs that sometimes arose from its depths, as if the glass itself were speaking in a language only she could understand. Often she would see a flicker of light that suggested danger or trouble, and she would carry that knowledge carefully into the day, guiding her actions to help or prevent harm. The villagers, for their part, respected her abilities, though some whispered that the mirror gave her unnatural insight. Zara never boasted, nor did she flaunt its powers. It was her private companion, a trusted friend, and a reminder of the grandmother who had passed the gift down with love and warning. Her daily life was filled with small acts of care and attentiveness. She helped the old miller repair his wheel, guided children safely through the fields, and offered her ear to anyone in need. Yet even in these simple deeds, the mirror's influence could be seen. When a villager came to her in distress, she often knew what words to speak or what small action to take to ease the heartache, as though she could see the hidden knot of worry and unravel it with her presence. After each encounter she would return to the mirror, noticing subtle changes, a flicker, a color shift, a reflection that seemed slightly altered, reminding her that the world was richer and stranger than it appeared. Zara's gentle demeanor made her beloved by the village, but it also drew quiet attention. The mirror, while helpful, carried a weight of responsibility. She often paused in thought, brushing her fingers over the frame as though grounding herself, listening to the faint hum of truths that the glass revealed. Birds would sometimes alight near her window, singing in soft harmonies that seemed in tune with the whispers from the mirror. She would smile, understanding that life itself was full of connections, some visible and some hidden, all interwoven in ways that only patience, kindness, and attentiveness could perceive. Every evening, after her daily tasks, Zara would sit again before the mirror, reflecting not only on her own day but on the lives she touched and the subtle patterns of the village. She understood that her gift was a responsibility, a chance to act with insight and compassion, and that the mirror, in all its quiet, magical vigilance, would guide her as long as she remained gentle, patient, and open to the unseen. It was not merely a glass, but a window to understanding, a companion, and a reminder that sometimes, what is reflected back is more important than what is plainly visible. Raisin was a man whose presence filled a room with a quiet tension, a tall, imposing figure with sharp eyes that never seemed to miss a thing. In the village, he was known for his pride, his quick temper, and the calculated way he wielded authority over his household. Where Zara moved with gentleness and insight, Raisin moved with force and cunning. He could command attention with a single word, and yet there was always an edge of unease in the air whenever he entered a space, an invisible shadow of impatience, suspicion, and latent cruelty. From the moment Zara came under his roof, he had felt a flicker of envy, a gnawing irritation that only grew with time. At first, his resentment was subtle, manifesting in quiet remarks and condescending gestures. When Zara advised the villagers on matters of planting and harvest, he would mutter under his breath about her influence, claiming the wisdom of a young girl could not surpass his own experience. When she gently corrected him in private, pointing out errors he had overlooked or warning of consequences he had ignored, his face would flush with anger and frustration. The mirror, always quietly gleaming in the corner of her room, seemed to him an affront, a symbol of a power he could neither command nor understand. He began to fixate on it, imagining that if he could seize it, bend it to his will, perhaps he could reclaim the control he so desperately desired. Small incidents began to reveal the depth of his envy. Raisin would glare at Zara as she helped the villagers, a flicker of malice passing across his features whenever she quietly redirected a dispute or offered counsel that softened tempers. When a neighbor accidentally spilled water near her mirror, Raisin would scowl, muttering about carelessness, though his ire seemed rooted not in the accident itself but in the fact that the mirror reflected truths he wished hidden. Each time Zara hinted at matters of the household he had kept secret, each gentle admonition or observation that exposed his pride or flaws, he felt a sting that no punishment could erase. His jealousy was no longer a private seed, it grew like a vine in his chest, curling tightly around his mind, whispering that he must dominate, must control, must break what defied him. The mirror became an obsession. In the quiet of his study, he would imagine it on his walls, under his gaze, reflecting only what he wished others to see. He dreamt of the glass obeying him, bending its secrets to his whims, revealing not truths, but illusions crafted by his command. Yet the more he thought of it, the more elusive it seemed. The mirror remained a silent observer, its power subtle but undeniable, an ever-present reminder of the wisdom and insight he could not manipulate. Raisin's anger simmered, sometimes erupting in sharp words toward Zara, sometimes in cold, deliberate acts meant to assert dominance, yet always leaving him unsatisfied, hollow, and increasingly desperate. The villagers began to notice the tension in the household, whispers floating from doorways and market stalls. Some wondered why Zara appeared so calm, her hands steady and her gaze clear, while Raisin's brow furrowed with dark intensity. There was fear too, for Raisin's pride was known to erupt like a storm, unpredictable and harsh. And yet, in every flicker of shadow and every subtle reflection in the mirror, the truth remained: Zara's gentle strength was untouched by his fury, and the mirror, silently gleaming, seemed to pulse with quiet warning. By the time the sun sank behind the hills each evening, Raisin would sit in his study, staring at the spot where the mirror stood, imagining the control he could seize, and feeling a rising sense of foreboding he could neither name nor ignore. The seeds of obsession were planted, and the quiet, simmering rage that had long dwelt in his heart now sought expression. He would soon discover that the mirror did not bend for anger, nor yield to pride. It reflected not the desires of the wicked, but the truths they could not escape. And in that reflection, Raisin's path was already shadowed with peril, for what he saw in the glass was only the beginning of a reckoning he could not yet comprehend. Raisin's anger had been simmering for weeks, each slight, each act of independence from Zara gnawing at his pride like a relentless fire. That evening, when the sun had dipped low behind the hills and the village was bathed in the soft, golden haze of twilight, his temper finally broke. Zara had quietly tended to a minor dispute between two neighbors, offering gentle advice that prevented their anger from spilling into violence. Raisin, who had been observing from the doorway, felt a flash of humiliation. His voice, sharp and trembling with fury, cut through the evening air. "Enough, girl," he shouted, his tone echoing like a whip. "You will obey me. You will do as I say, and you will cease this meddling." Zara, calm but firm, met his gaze. "I only act to protect those who cannot protect themselves," she said softly. "I do no harm." Her words, though gentle, ignited the last sparks of Raisin's fury. He lunged forward, his hand closing around the ornate frame of the mirror. The glass vibrated under his grip as he swung it violently, shattering it into countless pieces that tumbled across the floor with a sharp, ringing clatter. The fragments scattered like fallen stars, glinting in the fading light, each one reflecting a tiny, distorted shard of reality. Zara fell back, her breath caught in her throat. The mirror, her cherished companion, her link to insight and understanding, lay broken. She felt a surge of violation, as if the very essence of her private world had been ripped away, leaving her hollow. Yet even as her heart ached, her eyes were drawn to the shards. There was something strange about them. Each fragment seemed to shimmer with movement, catching light in ways that should have been impossible. And within each tiny reflection she saw not herself but glimpses of Raisin. His greed, his cruelty, his selfish pride. One shard revealed him berating a helpless laborer in secret. Another showed his unkind words to his own kin, another the small malicious acts he had performed that no one else had noticed. A wave of realization washed over her. The mirror had not been destroyed. Its power had not vanished. In its fragments, the truth remained, magnified and impossible to ignore. The shards reflected his sins in a way that even Raisin himself could not fully suppress. It was as though the glass had taken a fragment of his soul and thrown it back at him, unflinching and unyielding. Zara's fear mingled with awe. She felt small and powerless, yet she sensed a quiet, growing strength, that even in its broken state, the mirror could protect her, could reveal what must be seen and perhaps could guide justice in its own subtle, relentless way. The noise of the shattering glass carried beyond the walls of the house, drawing the attention of villagers. Some came running, their faces etched with shock and fear. Others stayed hidden, trembling, knowing that when Raisin's temper flared, the consequences could be severe. Whispers spread like wildfire. "He has lost all control," some said. "The girl, and the mirror, there is something strange here," others murmured. But no one dared intervene directly. Raisin's fury was legendary, and the stories of his wrath had kept even the bravest at bay. Raisin himself, breathing heavily, stood over the broken pieces. His chest heaved with rage, and his eyes darted nervously from shard to shard, catching fragments of himself he did not wish to see. In one small piece, his reflection twisted with anger and fear, the eyes staring back at him accusingly. In another, he glimpsed the selfishness he had hidden behind a proud mask. He gritted his teeth, shaking his head, convinced the mirror was playing tricks, yet a creeping unease began to settle in his stomach. Each shard seemed to hum with quiet power, as though alive, as though waiting. Zara, though shaken, rose slowly, her gaze steady on the fragments scattered across the floor. She felt the violation, yes, but also a spark of understanding. The mirror had not betrayed her. It had revealed the truth not just about the world but about the man who had sought to control it. And in those countless tiny shards, the mirror's power endured, hinting at the reckoning that would one day come, when the weight of truth would no longer be avoided or ignored. The fragments of the shattered mirror glittered on the floor like fallen stars, each piece catching the last rays of sunlight and scattering them in 1,000 directions. Zara knelt among the shards, her fingers trembling as she reached toward a small, jagged fragment. What she saw made her pause. It was not her reflection that stared back, but Raisin's face, twisted in anger and fear, eyes darting as though trying to hide secrets that could not be concealed. Each shard seemed to hold a different moment, a different truth about him. In one, he berated a helpless worker, shaking his fist with cruel satisfaction. In another, he hoarded supplies meant for the villagers, his eyes gleaming with selfish pride. Yet another showed the quiet lies he told to friends and kin, carefully woven to protect his image while hurting others. Zara's breath caught in her throat. The mirror, though broken, was no longer simply a companion. It was a sentinel, a keeper of truth, and a silent protector of those who could not protect themselves. She realized then that the mirror had always been more than a reflection. It had shown her hidden realities, whispered warnings of future consequences, and now, in its fragmented form, it was revealing a clear, undeniable judgment. The shards pulsed with quiet magic, each one a piece of a larger whole, holding a story of injustice that could no longer remain hidden. Raisin, meanwhile, paced the room, his fists clenched, his chest tight with lingering fury. He caught glimpses of his own face in the shards, each reflection catching him at a moment he wished to forget. For a fleeting instant, he felt the weight of his actions, the cruelty, the deception, the greed he had fostered and nurtured over the years. And yet, his pride would not allow him to admit what he saw. He dismissed the visions as tricks of the light, illusions born from magic or imagination, anything but the truth staring back at him from the mirror fragments. He shook his head violently, muttering that a mirror could not hold power over a man such as he, that reflections were mere glass, powerless to affect reality. But Zara saw differently. She felt the shards vibrate softly beneath her hands, their energy warm and insistent. Each fragment seemed to resonate with her own heartbeat, linking her to the magic within, whispering that she could act, that she could hold Raisin accountable, and that the power to reveal truth was now firmly in her grasp. She felt a thrill of both fear and determination, recognizing that the mirror's broken state had not weakened it, it had strengthened its resolve. Its magic was no longer passive, it had become a weapon of insight, a guardian of justice, and a force that could not be ignored. Suspense hung in the air like a thick fog. Raisin's anger simmered beneath his forced composure, while Zara's eyes traced the jagged edges of the shards, calculating, considering. She understood that the mirror was teaching her patience, teaching her strategy. She did not yet need to act openly, for the fragments were already working quietly, showing her the sins of the man who sought to dominate her. The villagers, if they glimpsed the shards, might not understand, but Zara did. Each piece of glass was a key, a tool, a silent witness that could not be silenced. As the evening shadows stretched long across the floor, Zara felt a subtle shift. The magic of the mirror pulsed, alive in fragments, ready to protect, ready to guide, ready to reveal the truth when the time was right. And somewhere, in the depth of his prideful heart, Raisin began to feel a ripple of unease, a faint recognition that the shards were more than mere glass, that they might one day force him to face what he had long denied. The power of the mirror, fractured yet indomitable, had begun its quiet work. And Zara, with newfound resolve, understood that she was no longer helpless. She had allies in the truth itself, reflecting relentlessly, patiently, and mercilessly. Zara knelt among the glittering shards of the broken mirror, her fingers tracing the jagged edges carefully, mindful not to cut herself. Though the glass was shattered, she sensed a pulse of energy vibrating through each fragment, a subtle hum that seemed to respond to her touch. It was as if the mirror itself had consciousness, waiting for her to understand its rhythm, its secrets, and its potential. Slowly, she began to arrange the shards on the wooden floor of her room, experimenting with patterns, angles, and alignments. Each piece reflected not only light but faint visions, glimpses of moments otherwise hidden, truths that had been whispered in silence or obscured by deception. As she worked, Zara discovered that the shards could focus and amplify the mirror's power. When placed together, the reflections merged to reveal more than isolated fragments. They created clarity. She saw a villager plotting to cheat a neighbor out of their land, a merchant secretly hoarding goods in times of famine, and even small acts of kindness and loyalty that had gone unnoticed. The mirror's fragments had become a lens into the hearts of the people around her, exposing intentions both noble and corrupt. Each new pattern she formed seemed to reveal a layer of reality that had been invisible to ordinary eyes, and the more she experimented, the more confident she felt in interpreting the subtle messages hidden within the glass. Zara's emotional growth was rapid. In the days that followed, she approached the villagers not with suspicion, but with understanding. She learned patience, observing behaviors before acting, recognizing that every action, kind or cruel, left traces, and the mirror showed them. She began to trust her instincts, guided by the reflections, learning to balance judgment with compassion. The mirror's shards whispered of nuances she might otherwise miss: hesitation in a smile, tension in a handshake, subtle signs of truth and deception woven into everyday life. Each insight honed her awareness, teaching her not only about the villagers but about her own moral compass. She realized the mirror was not merely a tool for judgment, but a teacher, showing her the delicate interplay of choice, consequence, and character. As she experimented, Zara also began to sense the larger purpose of the shards. They did not merely reveal the sins or virtues of others. They hinted at justice yet to be served. One night, as she arranged the fragments near her window, a vision appeared of Raisin, a reflection of his pride and cruelty framed in the shards, surrounded by the mirrored evidence of his own misdeeds. A subtle pulse in the glass suggested that his actions could no longer remain hidden, that the mirror's power would someday hold him accountable. The thought sent a chill down her spine, but also filled her with determination. She would not act out of vengeance, but out of clarity and fairness, guided by the mirror's impartial reflections. The villagers began to notice subtle changes in Zara. She moved with a quiet confidence that had not been there before. Her calm, observant nature made her seem wise beyond her years. Though she shared little of the mirror's magic, her ability to perceive the truth and respond with measured insight earned her greater respect. Children and elders alike sought her counsel, unaware of the shard's deeper power, and Zara found herself growing into a role she had never anticipated, guardian not only of the mirror, but of fairness and integrity in the village. By the time the sun set each evening, Zara would sit among the shards, carefully arranging them into intricate patterns, feeling the subtle hum of their magic resonate with her own heartbeat. Each reflection was a teacher, each shard a guide, each vision a lesson. She realized that the mirror had chosen her not simply to observe truth, but to wield it wisely, to act with patience, compassion, and insight. And as she gazed at the tiny fragments glowing softly in the candlelight, she understood that the shards could do more than reveal secrets. They could illuminate justice, guiding her and the village toward a future shaped by honesty, courage, and moral clarity. Zara had spent days arranging the shards of the shattered mirror in careful patterns, attuned to the pulse of their hidden magic. The fragments responded to her focus, shimmering softly as if aware of her intentions. That evening she decided to take the first cautious step in wielding their power. Placing the shards in a circle on the floor, she positioned the largest pieces to reflect Raisin's movements as he passed the doorway, angling smaller fragments to catch glimpses of his face, his hands, the subtle expressions of his pride and deceit. As he moved through the house, the shards caught him in their fractured reflections, multiplying his image across the floor, each fragment silently revealing his actions in ways he could not ignore. At first, Raisin noticed only odd flickers in the glass, dismissing them as tricks of light or the imagination. But then came the small, undeniable signs. He spilled water he did not notice, his carefully stacked coins toppled without explanation. Whispered words he did not recall having spoken were repeated back to him as if carried by the wind. Each incident, small in isolation, carried a subtle echo of his own misdeeds. The mirror fragments acted like mirrors of the soul, catching every selfish glance, every harsh word, every quiet act of cruelty. Raisin's arrogance began to crack. He frowned, his brow furrowed as a creeping sense of unease settled in his chest. The more he tried to ignore the reflections, the stronger the influence of the shards became. A minor argument with a villager escalated in his mind as he remembered, in flash after flash, the times he had been dishonest or harsh. A loyal servant's minor complaint brought forth visions of the many injustices he had committed, mirrored back from the shard's glinting surfaces. Raisin's unease grew, manifesting in trembling hands and restless pacing. Each time he caught sight of a fragment, he glimpsed a truth he could not deny, a shadow of his corruption reflected with startling clarity. The villagers began to notice subtle changes in his behavior. Raisin, once boastful and domineering, now walked with a stiffness, his eyes darting to corners as if expecting judgment to emerge from the shadows. He avoided gatherings where gossip might expose him, speaking cautiously and frowning at the simplest interactions. Whispers began to spread. "He seems haunted," one villager murmured. "Something watches him," said another. They did not know the source, but they felt the ripple of unease, the tension that seemed to radiate from his very presence. Zara observed quietly from her room, her heart steady but alert. She did not gloat or act in haste, she merely guided the mirror's fragments, allowing them to do their work. The shards revealed truth, not vengeance, and their subtle power began to awaken in Raisin a recognition of the consequences of his actions. Yet the suspense lingered like a heavy fog. Would he awaken fully to the truth mirrored before him, or would pride and fear consume him, driving him deeper into cruelty and darkness? Night after night, Zara continued her careful manipulations, arranging the shards and observing the reflections. Each misfortune, each stumble, each flicker of doubt in Raisin's eyes was a ripple of justice, small but undeniable. The mirror's fragments had become her silent allies, instruments of subtle accountability. And though the household remained tense, quiet, and uneasy, Zara felt a growing confidence. The shards had revealed not just Raisin's sins, but the potential for recognition and change, a delicate balance she must maintain, guiding the fractured mirror's magic with patience and wisdom. By the glow of candlelight, the shards pulsed gently, resonating with her intent. Zara understood now that power could be wielded without confrontation, that truth could shape the conscience without force. And somewhere in Raisin's restless dreams, the first seeds of recognition had taken root, though whether they would grow into remorse or rage remained uncertain. The first consequences of the mirror's magic had begun, silent, relentless, and inevitable. The shards of the mirror glimmered like a constellation scattered across the floor, each fragment reflecting not only light but hidden truths Zara had yet to uncover. Over the days she had learned to arrange them with care, aligning their jagged edges into patterns that amplified their magic. The reflections had already begun to reveal Raisin's misdeeds in minor, unsettling ways, but now the mirror seemed to pulse with greater intensity, as if urging her to see further, to peer into the deeper layers of deceit and corruption that had long festered unseen. Zara knelt among the shards, her eyes tracing the fractured images, and gasped as the first of the deeper secrets unfolded. In one fragment, Raisin was shown accepting bribes from a traveling merchant, exchanging gold for favors while leaving honest villagers to suffer. In another, he was witnessed quietly undermining a loyal servant, twisting words and spreading falsehoods to discredit those who had served him faithfully. A third shard revealed his exploitation of the weakest in the village, children forced to run errands in harsh conditions, the elderly neglected, the poor ignored. The mirror spared nothing. Its fragments reflected all the hidden cruelty and betrayal, bringing them into the light of Zara's understanding. The weight of the revelations pressed on Zara's heart. She felt anger flare, hot and immediate, yet intertwined with a deep sadness. The power to expose Raisin's sins was intoxicating, but she knew that mere revelation was not enough. The mirror offered her guidance, a path to restore balance without descending into outright vengeance. She recognized the delicate line she must walk, to wield justice without cruelty, to reveal truth without becoming a tyrant herself. In the silence of her room, Zara breathed slowly, grounding herself, allowing the mirror's magic to teach patience as well as power. Raisin, meanwhile, began to sense the growing influence of the shards in ways he could not fully comprehend. Small incidents accumulated into a gnawing unease. Coins disappeared from his table only to reappear in unlikely places, letters and documents twisted in reflection to reveal hidden truths. Shadows in his home seemed to mimic his movements with subtle exaggeration. His pride battled the creeping awareness that something beyond his control was observing him, judging him, forcing him to confront his own flaws. Yet he refused to look directly, dismissing each sign as coincidence, luck, or trickery. His arrogance blinded him to the vulnerability the mirror now exposed, even as it meticulously documented every secret, every betrayal, every misdeed. Zara continued her careful observation, allowing the shards to guide her understanding of both the world and herself. She noticed patterns, the sins repeated not as isolated acts, but as part of a larger chain of choices that had harmed others. She realized that the mirror did not merely reflect external truth, it illuminated moral responsibility, highlighting how personal actions rippled outward to affect the lives of those around her. And she understood that confronting Raisin directly could provoke his wrath and destabilize the balance she sought to maintain. Instead, she relied on the shards, letting them subtly shape awareness, reveal guilt, and plant seeds of reflection within him. Emotionally, Zara grappled with the tension between forgiveness and justice. She longed to see Raisin truly repent, to witness transformation rather than destruction. Yet every shard that revealed a new sin reminded her of the depth of his cruelty and the suffering he had caused. Her heart ached with the desire to protect those hurt by his actions, while also nurturing a hope that he might recognize his own misdeeds before it was too late. Each day, as the shards pulsed gently beneath her hands, she felt the mirror whisper that true power lay not in rage or punishment, but in measured revelation and the guidance of conscience. The village itself seemed to respond to the mirror's awakening influence. Small signs of change rippled outward. Loyal villagers began acting with quiet confidence, emboldened by the subtle exposure of hidden truths. Rumors of justice spread, though no one could name its source. And Raisin, caught in the web of his own pride and the relentless reflections of the shards, began to feel a tightening pressure around his mind and spirit. He had glimpsed the consequences of his choices but refused to admit them fully, his denial setting the stage for a reckoning he could not yet perceive. Zara remained calm, her determination tempered by patience. The shards had shown her the path forward, truth as a teacher, justice as a guide, and restraint as the ultimate strength. She understood that the mirror's power could restore balance without bloodshed, that the fragments were her allies, and that her role was not to destroy Raisin but to illuminate him. And as she arranged the shards once more, the fragments glimmered in quiet acknowledgement, reflecting her resolve and the promise that justice, like light, would find a way to shine through even the darkest of hearts. Zara spent long hours with the shards, carefully arranging them into intricate patterns that seemed almost like a constellation scattered across the floor. Each fragment pulsed faintly, a whisper of light and truth waiting to be awakened. Guided by her grandmother's faded notes, she began to understand that the mirror's power was not merely in its reflection but in the alignment, the way each shard could speak to the others, forming a network of insight that no deceit could escape. By connecting the fragments into a cohesive design, Zara discovered that she could project a reflection so complete, so undeniable, that even the most proud or stubborn heart could not turn away from it. The ritual was delicate. She traced the patterns, arranging shards by size, angle, and the faint vibrations they emitted. Candlelight flickered across the jagged surfaces, casting shadows that danced along the walls like living forms. Zara focused her thoughts, calling on patience, clarity, and wisdom rather than anger. She realized that true justice did not require fury or punishment, only precision, awareness, and understanding. Every movement was deliberate, every placement calculated. The shards responded, their pulse growing stronger as they aligned, until the circle of reflections glowed with a soft, unwavering light. It was a mirror of truth so vivid it could not be ignored, a reflection that showed not only Raisin's deeds but the consequences of his choices, the harm he had inflicted, and the moral weight pressing down upon him. Raisin, meanwhile, prowled through the house, unaware that his own arrogance was leading him directly into the mirror's influence. He sought to intimidate Zara, to reclaim control, to destroy the fragments he had once shattered. But with each step, he walked closer to the network of reflections, the shards catching glimpses of his actions and multiplying them across the room. Unseen currents of energy radiated from the arranged mirror, aligning with Zara's intent. He felt a subtle chill, a tightening in the chest, as if the house itself was holding him accountable. Yet his pride kept him moving forward, blind to the inevitability forming around him. Zara observed quietly, her calmness a stark contrast to Raisin's tension. She felt her own growth as the ritual progressed, a spiritual and mental awakening that went beyond the mirror. The shards reflected not only external truths but internal clarity, teaching her patience, focus, and the power of subtlety. She no longer feared confrontation. She understood that the strength of wisdom could surpass the force of anger. By letting the mirror's magic act as her instrument, she could ensure justice without resorting to cruelty, manipulation, or rash action. The room seemed to hold its breath as the shards aligned completely, forming a radiant web of truth. Light shimmered along the edges of the fragments, casting reflections that intertwined, overlapping to reveal the full picture of Raisin's misdeeds. The mirror's collective power created an effect unlike any single shard could achieve, a comprehensive vision that exposed deceit, malice, and hidden corruption with unflinching clarity. It was a reflection that could not be dismissed, denied, or ignored. Zara felt a surge of quiet triumph, tempered with humility. She understood that the shards had not chosen her to punish, but to illuminate, to guide, and to restore balance. As Raisin approached, unaware that he was walking into his own reflection of truth, Zara centered herself, feeling the pulse of the shards resonate with her heartbeat. She knew the moment of reckoning was near, yet she remained composed, ready to let the mirror reveal what words and threats never could. In that still, sacred space, Zara realized the essence of justice. It was not rage or domination but clarity, focus, and wisdom. And as the shards shimmered in unison, the air thick with anticipation, the room seemed alive with the quiet, unstoppable power of truth ready to awaken. Raisin stormed into the room, his face flushed with fury, his eyes blazing with the arrogance of a man accustomed to command. He clenched his fists, towering over Zara as if sheer intimidation could restore the control he had lost. "Do you think shards of glass can defy me?" he growled, his voice echoing against the walls. The air felt heavy, charged with tension, as the flickering candlelight caught on the edges of the mirror shards, making them gleam with a subtle, almost defiant radiance. Zara remained calm, standing at the center of the carefully arranged fragments. She did not flinch, did not raise her voice, but allowed the shards to do their work. As Raisin advanced, the reflections multiplied, capturing him from every angle. Each shard caught a piece of his soul, and in their fragmented reflections he could no longer hide. His greed, once subtle and hidden behind polite words, flashed before him as vivid visions. Him pocketing coins meant for the villagers, twisting favors into profit, and turning away those in need. A smaller shard displayed his lies, the clever manipulations he had employed to maintain power. He saw himself whispering falsehoods, crafting deceptions with meticulous care, and then witnessing the consequences without guilt. His cruelty appeared in another fragment. The sharp reprimands, the silent punishments, the emotional blows he had dealt to those who loved or trusted him. Each vision was undeniable, precise, and unavoidable, leaving him shaken. The shards did not speak or accuse, they simply reflected, yet their truth struck harder than any words could. The villagers, peeking cautiously from the doorways, began to notice subtle changes. Raisin's arrogance faltered, his stride slowed and his fists unclenched. The fire of his anger dissipated, replaced by a tremor of unease and disbelief. Whispers ran through the room. "He is seeing everything," one villager murmured, eyes wide. Others nodded quietly, sensing the shift in the balance of power. The mirror was not merely glass, it was a living testament to truth, and Raisin was forced to confront himself in ways he could neither control nor escape. Zara moved with deliberate calm, stepping slightly to guide his gaze across the shards, ensuring he could not turn away. She did not speak harshly, did not lecture, she needed no words. The shards themselves became instruments of revelation, each one strategically placed to confront Raisin with a part of his soul he had long refused to acknowledge. For the first time he could not evade responsibility. His breath came in shallow gasps and beads of sweat appeared on his brow, not from exertion, but from the sudden weight of truth pressing upon him. Suspense thickened the air like fog. Would Raisin bend beneath the mirror's revelations, or would pride and defiance drive him to rebel against the unflinching reflections? The shards shimmered in quiet anticipation, attuned to Zara's will and the moral clarity she had nurtured. With each step he took, the visions grew sharper, more precise, illuminating every corner of his character he had sought to conceal. The room vibrated with a tension that was neither loud nor violent, but deeply profound. The confrontation was not a battle of strength, but a trial of conscience, and Raisin felt himself unprepared for the trial's weight. Zara, her expression serene, watched him falter. Her heart remained steady, knowing that the mirror's power did not demand vengeance, only recognition. As Raisin's eyes darted from shard to shard, the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see whether the reflection of his sins would inspire repentance, or if he would recoil, lost to the shadows of his own pride. The confrontation had begun, and the shards, shimmering like silent judges, ensured that truth could not be denied. Zara worked carefully to gather the remaining shards, each fragment now imbued not with anger or fear, but with clarity and purpose. She cleaned and polished them, arranging them into a whole once more, but this time the mirror was no longer merely a reflection of vanity or beauty. It had become a symbol of moral guidance, an instrument to illuminate truth, reveal hidden intentions, and hold even the proud accountable. Every edge shimmered with a soft, purposeful light, radiating a quiet authority that could be felt even from across the room. The household, once filled with tension and fear, began to breathe again. Raisin, humbled yet aware of the road ahead, stepped back, no longer seeking to dominate or deceive. He watched as Zara carefully positioned the mirror in its rightful place, understanding that its power was not meant for intimidation but for reflection, learning, and the cultivation of virtue. The servants and villagers who had long endured the household's turbulence felt the oppressive weight lift. Quietly, they whispered among themselves, acknowledging the shift and the lessons embedded within the shattered fragments that had now become whole. Outside the household, the village seemed to respond as well. The energy of truth, patience, and justice flowed outward, washing away years of small resentments, whispered lies, and unspoken fears. Children played more freely, their laughter echoing in the streets, while elders smiled knowingly, recognizing the careful balance that had been restored. It was as if the mirror's lessons had extended beyond its physical boundaries, touching the hearts of all who lived in the village. Zara moved with grace and intention, explaining to those who asked that the mirror's power was not to punish, but to guide. She demonstrated how its shards, when carefully aligned, could reveal both the light and darkness within a person, providing the opportunity for reflection, growth, and change. Villagers watched as she subtly placed the mirror in the central hall, its surface now calm and even, glowing with an inner wisdom rather than reflecting only the outward appearances of those who approached it. The lessons of the household became lessons for the community. People began to treat one another with greater honesty, understanding that secrets and deceit could always be exposed, not by force, but by the natural clarity of truth. The mirror became a symbol of accountability, and those who once acted selfishly or dishonestly found themselves guided by the silent, unwavering reminder of their own conscience. Even the smallest gestures, previously overlooked, were now considered carefully, for every action had the potential to ripple through the lives of others. Zara herself felt a profound sense of growth. The experience with the mirror, the confrontation with Raisin, and the careful restoration of balance had tempered her wisdom and patience. She understood that true power was not in dominance or fear, but in insight, strategy, and the ability to wield knowledge with fairness. The mirror had taught her that even something broken could become a force for justice if approached with care, reflection, and intentionality. As the villagers celebrated quietly, acknowledging the restored harmony, they began to treat the mirror with respect. They no longer saw it as an object of vanity or superstition, but as a guide, a teacher, and a guardian of moral balance. Children would often peek at its surface, their eyes wide with curiosity, and elders would nod approvingly, knowing that its lessons would endure. The household thrived, the village flourished, and Zara's presence became synonymous with wisdom, fairness, and the subtle power of reflection. In every glance at the mirror, everyone could see not just their own image, but the consequences of choices, the importance of honesty, and the value of patience. Harmony had returned, not through fear or force, but through insight, cleverness, and the careful nurturing of truth. The once shattered mirror now radiated calm authority, silently teaching all who approached that even in the most turbulent of times, balance could be restored and justice could prevail. Generations later, the village still whispered the story of Zara and her mirror, a tale woven into the very fabric of their lives. Children would gather at the hearth, eyes wide with wonder, as elders recounted the young woman who had faced a cruel and deceitful stepfather, yet had restored balance not through force or anger, but through cleverness, patience, and an unwavering sense of justice. The mirror, once broken and scattered in shards, had become a symbol that transcended time, a lesson etched in glass and memory alike. In the morning light, children would sneak into Zara's old house, now preserved as a place of learning and reflection, to catch glimpses of the famed mirror. They marveled not at their own reflections, but at the way the shards, carefully reassembled, seemed to glow with quiet wisdom. It was said that if someone attempted to deceive, to hide a selfish act or a cruel thought, the mirror would subtly shimmer, revealing the truth in ways both gentle and undeniable. Teachers would guide the young ones, explaining that the mirror was more than glass. It was a reminder that actions carried weight, and that honesty and integrity were virtues that should never be ignored. Villagers often recounted stories of how, in times of dispute or temptation, a glance at the mirror was enough to remind someone of the consequences of deceit. Farmers who once cheated in trade, merchants tempted to lie in their accounts, even friends on the brink of betrayal would pause when faced with the mirror's unwavering gaze. Though no magic could force their hearts to change, the lessons embedded in the glass acted as a moral compass, a silent guide pointing toward honesty, fairness, and accountability. Parents told their children, even when someone tries to hide their misdeeds, truth can be reflected in unexpected ways. The moral resonated deeply, teaching that cunning and cleverness, when paired with wisdom and patience, could turn even the most broken and powerless things into forces for good. The mirror, broken and reassembled by Zara's careful hands, stood as a testament that fractures do not signify defeat. Instead, they can become instruments of clarity, tools to reveal what cannot be hidden, and shields to protect the innocent. As time passed, the mirror became more than an object. It became a symbol of vigilance and courage. Villagers came to treat it with respect, consulting it not to spy or punish, but to seek guidance and insight. Rituals developed around it. Moments of reflection where people would pause, considering their actions and intentions. The mirror's presence reminded them that justice did not always require confrontation, that sometimes the most powerful force was quiet awareness and the ability to illuminate truth. Stories of Zara's calm courage spread beyond the village. Travelers passing through would hear the tale and marvel at the young woman who had faced cruelty with intelligence rather than violence, and who had transformed a simple mirror into a guardian of morality. Parents from distant lands would teach their children that even broken things, carefully tended, could become sources of wisdom and instruments of justice. And so, Zara's legacy endured, not merely as a memory of one girl's bravery, but as a timeless lesson in cleverness, patience, and moral courage. At the heart of the village, the mirror remained, glimmering softly in its place. It no longer reflected only faces, it reflected choices, intentions, and character. Every visitor, young or old, knew that in its shards lay the power to see beyond appearances, to confront truth and to act with integrity. In every glint, every polished edge, the villagers felt Zara's presence, her wisdom echoing through time, a perpetual reminder that even what is broken can reveal what cannot be hidden, and that justice, tempered by insight, can shine through even the most shattered pieces.